Hey everyone, how you doing? Um, Happy Friday or another week. Coming to you from snowy New Hampshire. It's always fun when we have snow before Halloween. Just a little bit of snow this morning. Got a little chilly last night, so yeah, winter's on its way. I hope where you are is beautiful, nice. You're enjoying the weather, enjoying time with friends and family and whatnot. Um, I know last week I said that I was going to do a Q&A with some other health coaches, but trying to wrangle a bunch of health coaches together at a retreat where everyone wants to do their own thing is kind of difficult, so I didn't get an opportunity to do that. So I figured I'd answer some of the questions that I got here today. It would just be me answering them and not everyone else, not the other health coaches, but nonetheless, I wanted to get some of those questions answered today. So today's going to be more of a Q&A style, just a couple of questions that I had gotten when I told everyone that I was going to do that. So if you like these Q&As, please let me know. I love to help people and help answer questions that they have. So please, I'd love to do more of these if people are interested in doing these Q&A style types of Facebook Live. So uh, just shoot me a message, let me know in the comments, or shoot me a direct message. Whatnot. So Sarah had asked me she had a couple questions, two questions really around stress, and sounds like she might have a newborn in the house, and she is trying to mitigate the effects of sleep disruptions from obviously their newborn waking up in the middle of the night. So I've gone through this twice now. And yeah, it's a tough thing to deal with. There is no really good answer to this problem. Newborns, kids, even outside of newborns, they're going to wake you up, and there's nothing you can really do about it. While it would be ideal that you would not get woken up all the time, it's part of being a parent. And the best thing that my wife and I did, I think, to help mitigate this was to go to bed earlier, but not like extremely early, right? So we put the kids down for sleep. Especially the newborns, probably, they'd fall asleep for the night. Between 6:30 and 7, I think it was, and we would go to bed. We started going to bed pretty soon after that, so we were generally in bed around 8:30, probably the latest around 9 o'clock, and that gave us for the most part a good few hours of sleep um, before they woke up for their first feeding or diaper change or whatnot. And when you're in a two-parent household, as a father, if you're the mother and you're maybe breastfeeding the baby, you can't feed the baby. So generally the kids are waking up in the middle of the night because they need to be fed when they're newborns, and you almost feel a little bit helpless. But what I would do, or we did, that found that worked best for us, is that I would get up and um, change my daughter or my son's diaper, and then if we thought that they were actually hungry, then my wife would actually get up after that and feed them, and then I would go back to bed, and she'd come back to bed after she was done with feeding them. Sometimes they didn't actually need to be fed, so I would get up and change diaper, or just rock them, or whatever, try to get them to go back to sleep so she could get more sleep. And yes, so we just kind of tag teamed it that way, and that's what worked for us. That's how we kind of did it. Um, as far as mitigating the effects for it, so like making sure you go to bed at a reasonable time, probably start going to bed a little bit earlier than you normally would be used to before you had a newborn, just to try and get a few solid hours before they first wake up, is the best way I think to do it. And then if you're still at home with your child, um, it's great to try and take a nap when they take a nap. So I'm not much of a napper, but on those days where it was really rough, I would try and go to sleep and get squeeze in a nap while they were taking their nap. So that's another way to mitigate it. If you have friends and family around, they're going to be able to help, take some time for them to watch the child. That's a good opportunity for you to get in sleep. Ultimately, it comes down to is just trying to get sleep wherever you possibly can. Um, if you start to see, like, you start to find that you might be getting a little burnt out, a little bit short on sleep. It's great to reach out to friends and family and see if they can come over for a day and help watch the baby, just so that you can just take some time to catch up on some sleep and stuff like that. Um, different things probably work for different people, and if other people have other tips, please leave them in the comments. I'd be interested in hearing them. But it's a hard thing to solve because there's no, you know, children are unpredictable. They're going to get up at different times at different amounts, and some kids are better sleepers than others. So it can just be a really tough situation, especially depending on your other family situation, whether you're a single parent or you have a husband or another spouse at home, significant other, or if you have friends and family around versus you don't. So it can be a bit of a challenging situation, but it's really just, the best advice that I can give is just squeezing in sleep wherever you possibly can and doing it as much as you possibly can. Sleep is probably going to be the most important thing for those first few months. So, even if it means sacrificing other things like working out or other things that you might want to do, you got to sleep. So, yeah, just squeezing in wherever you can. So I hope that helps, Sarah. And she had another question around trying to quantify the impacts of stress on the body. So, trying to basically identify how stressed you might be. And there's a couple different ways to do this. So, I'm going to start out with the least technical way to do this, which I think everyone can do. And this is actually something I have all my clients do when they first start with me. And that's just quantifying their subjective stress. So each day, at the end of the day, I have them write down just quickly in a note on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you, right? So 1 being super chill and relaxed, and 10 being I'm really stressed out of my mind. Where do you fall on that scale for the day for stress, and then why? Why do you, if you are super stressed, what is it that's bugging you? And that's the easiest way to do it, and I think that's the simplest way that people can do it. Everyone can do that. Everyone can get out a piece of paper and write down how stressed they are. And there are more technical and high tech ways to do it, but I find that just really forces you to sit down and think about it, and to actually go over in your mind how your day was and what was causing the stress, etc. Right? And it really is just like your subjective feeling about it. So that's probably the best way to measure it. There are physiological things that happen when we are stressed, and it has to do around our heart rate. So oftentimes sometimes a measure of stress can be what's your lowest resting heart rate. That occurs, maybe you might take your heart rate with first thing in the morning, or if you have some fancy device like a Oura ring, it will measure it throughout the night and tell you at what point your heart rate lowers. And generally, the quicker it lowers at night, the better, and the lower it is, the better. If it lowers too late, or if it's elevated above your normal resting heart rate, that could be a sign of stress as well. There's a physiological measure called your HRV, and that stands for heart rate variability, and that just measures the interval between the beats of your heart, right? And contrary to what you might think, your heart should beat at a slightly different interval from one beat to the next. And that shows a good measure of HRV. But if your heart rate is very constant, that means you could be very stressed. So there's various different ways and tools that measure HRV. Again, something like an Oura ring would measure it throughout the night and give you an HRV measure in the morning. You can get a heart rate monitor, a chest strap, and there are various different types of apps that you can use. I like iThlete, but it's more for athletes. But iThlete is ITHLETE. that will, with a simple Bluetooth heart rate monitor, chest strap, you can take a 60-second measurement of your heart rate in the morning, and that will measure your HRV. It also asks you a bunch of subjective questions. Again, it's targeted towards athletes, but it asks you, how stressed you are, how sore your muscles are, um, how your sleep was, how your diet was, these types of things, what your training load was, right? That type of stuff. Now it goes along with your heart rate. That all goes into kind of giving you some guidance as to what your training might look like for that day. But there's other tools that are not athlete focused that also measure HRV. Um, there's some that use the camera on your phone, and just you put it up against the back of your finger, and it will measure your heart rate and HRV from your finger, which is kind of cool. And they actually have studies that show that that's somewhat accurate. So that's another option, but you can look into HRV measurements as a way of quantifying the amount of stress you're on. Um, Generally, the higher the score, the better your HRV, and the more relaxed you are, the lower the score, and the more it's indicator of more stressed you are. Just one note on that. I wouldn't take that score as the end all be all. If you have a bad score one day, it doesn't mean that you're super stressed. It's just one score, right? Generally, with HRV measurements and even with heart rate to a degree, I like to look at the trend over time. So, how is that number trending over time? Is it continuously dropping, going down, 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 or it's staying particularly low for a long period of time? Well, that might be a sign that you're pretty stressed and you might need to do something to mitigate that. So it's just, day to day fluctuations probably don't mean that much and shouldn't really um, impact your decision one way or another. I also like to take into account the not only the measurement, the numbers, but the how the person feels. Right? If you have a crappy HRV score, but you feel really good, why should your HRV score or heart rate number dictate your day, right? Or should it put you in a bad mood, right? Otherwise, so just something to keep in mind when you use technology. It's not the end all be all. It's a nice tool, but it's not. It shouldn't be the ultimate dictator of how you feel. So just keep that in mind as well. So I hope that helps, Sarah. And the last question I had was around fish, because I've published 2 blog posts over the um, past week, and there's also on the benefits of eating fish, particularly around the healthy fats that are in fish for heart health and for athletic performance, right? And you can head to my blog at rjbhealth.coach and check out those 2 articles if you want to read about them. But a lot of people have brought up the concern about, is fish actually healthy? And my gut is always to say yes, fish is healthy, right? There's, especially when you're talking about wild caught, you know, fish. That's not farm raised or anything like that. You go down to your. I'm lucky enough to live in proximity to ocean, so I can go, down to my local fish market and get fresh fish. That's wild caught. With a few days old, if that. And I remember as a kid, I would go down to my grandmother would live by the ocean, and we would go to her house, and then we'd go down to the dock and get fresh lobster from the boat, right from the boat, right from the lobster fisherman that was caught that day, right. How can those things not be healthy? There's a couple things to keep in mind. So when we're talking about, so the one thing that's come up is the amount of microplastics that are in fish. So there's a recent study done that showed, um, certain fish, particularly sardines, are very high in microplastics. And granted, we know that ingesting plastic is probably not a good thing for us. There's probably no benefit to doing that. What we don't know is how much can be harmful to humans, and we don't know what the effects are, right? So no one's done a study that says, okay, once you cross this threshold of this amount of microplastics, that it's particularly harmful for us. And no one's done a study that says, okay, when you do cross that threshold, here are the effects physiologically on us as to what happens. Right? It's probably not good, but we just don't know the answers to that right now. So how do you mitigate that? Well, you know, trying to get wild caught fish is going to be, that are coming from the ocean is probably going to be better. The other thing is that a lot of the microplastics that are in fish live in their intestines, in their intestinal tract. So if you don't eat the whole fish, that can mitigate a lot of that. And most people don't eat the whole fish, but like I'm a huge fan of like eating the whole sardine like in a can. I'm a weirdo, I know. I'm probably in the minority, but that can be common for things like sardines, like small fish, sardines and anchovies and mackerel and stuff like that. So if you're particularly concerned about microplastics, one way to reduce the amount that you might be getting through fish is to not eat the whole fish. Then you lose out on other benefits. For example, when you're eating the whole fish, you get the bones and everything, and that provides a lot of calcium. And so, you got to weigh the benefits. The other thing you should think about is that microplastics don't, fish aren't the only source of microplastics. If you're drinking out of a lot of plastic water bottles or eating a lot of out of food out of a lot of plastic containers, you're getting microplastics from that as well. So if you're particularly concerned about your total microplastic load, which is what you should ultimately be concerned about, if you limit those other exposures, it leaves a little bit more room to, perhaps eat some whole sardines, right? Because you're taking out a lot of other microplastics in your diet. So it's something to keep in mind, it's something to think about, but at the end of the day, we don't have very solid answers as to the amount that's detrimental and what those effects might be at the moment. So the other thing that's come up with fish intake is that a very common way for people to get eat their fish is in canned form, right? That's very convenient to have canned tuna, canned salmon, canned sardines and mackerel and anchovies, and it's just a very common way to eat fish. Not everyone has access to fresh fish all the time. And so, having these canned options is really good. They preserve, they travel well, they don't go bad or anything like that. But the problem that's come up with the canned fish, or the people bring up with canned fish, is that the canning process produces a lot of oxidized cholesterol, and oxidized cholesterol is the bad type of cholesterol. Like, we know that to be pretty harmful when it comes to heart health and stuff like that. So we kind of want to limit the amount of oxidized cholesterol that we have intake from our food. And the one thing to know is that cholesterol oxidizes no matter, in various different ways, right? It happens when you grill meat. It happens when you any kind of cooking or processing is going to oxidize cholesterol. So it's not just canning that causes this. It's pretty much anything, but the numbers, the amount of oxidized cholesterol you get in the canning process can be quite high in some cases. Again, there's lots of ways to mitigate this, right? It looks like, for example, if you eat fish that's canned in brine or water, the amount of oxidized cholesterol will be a lot less than if you eat something that's canned in olive oil, for example. And the reason is that olive oil has a very low smoke point or heat point at which things start to break down and oxidation occurs. And when you can something, you generally heat it up pretty high, and so you're heating up olive oil to beyond the point that it should be heated, and it starts to break down, and you can get a lot of oxidized cholesterol from that. So, one way is to just eat the fish in its brine as opposed to eating it in canned in olive oil, for example. The other thing you can do is it appears that various different types of herbs and freezing beforehand. So, and like putting the fish in lemon juice, for example, might reduce the oxidized cholesterol amount. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, are you going to completely avoid eating canned fish and maybe not get the benefits of eating fish, like the healthy fats from it, to reduce the amount of oxidized cholesterol? My opinion is that you eat fresh fish when you can, and then eat canned fish, to some lessened degree if you're really concerned about it. I can't tell you what ratio it should be, but try to eat as much fresh fish as you possibly can. And then when you can't get fresh fish, eat your canned fish or whatever is convenient. Um, if you're someone who can't get fresh fish at all, you don't have access to fresh fish, then eating canned fish a few times a week, and then subs- um, supplementing with fish oil the other days is probably going to be your best bet if you're concerned about the excess cholesterol. So I don't really have a solid answer for you, but a couple people brought that stuff up, so I just wanted to kind of talk about it. If you're thinking about whether you should be eating fish and you want to get the benefits of fish, but what about these other problems that can creep up on there? So I've talked for far too long. It's been 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop talking now. And if you want to get more information just like this delivered to your inbox every week, please sign up for my newsletter at rjbhealth.coach. And you can sign up for the newsletter there and read the blog and all that stuff. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, please leave a comment below or send me a direct message. And I'm happy to help out. So we'll talk to you all next week.